Okay, hello and welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com. I'm the editor, and we are here for a panel discussion on BI and reporting in 2016 and the findings of a new survey that we ran on Microsoft Dynamics customers and partners. We decided to hold this event today to coincide with the release of a new report on investing in BI and reporting solutions. A report that's out. Many of you have probably seen it, and we'll link you back to it later in case you haven't. We also had two sponsors for the report. The leaders from both companies are on the line today to join us, and fortunately, they are also great subject matter experts and veterans of the BI and reporting space, so it's great to have them. I'm joined by Anthony D'Anna of deFacto Global. He's the COO and co-founder. And we're also joined by Brandon George, President of the Americas region for Hillstar Business Intelligence. So if you haven't already and you do want to download a copy of the report, please be sure to check out the articles that both companies contributed. It really helps to outline their visions, the value that they can bring beyond, in a range of areas that fall into the larger umbrella of the BI and reporting space. In just a minute, I'm going to let each of them take just a couple minutes to introduce themselves and really set the stage for today's discussion by explaining what it is they do, what they focus on, what it means for you in the audience if you're a Dynamics customer or a services professional. I think that will really be important because after that, we're going to move right into a look at some of the survey results and also just some of the discussion points that it raises. Some of the data really raises as many questions as it does answers, I think, and we're going to look at it in a range of ways. So here's our plan. I'm going to ask Brandon and Anthony each to speak for 5 minutes, which I think is going to be really key. And after that, we are going to be moving into the rest of the session where we explore those other details. We'll also be looking to the future a bit, and we do want to get your questions as well. So you can use the chat or the Q&A at any point during the session to enter your questions. We'll be taking some sort of in real time as we discuss. We'll be leaving some for the end as well, and we do welcome that at any point. So let's kick things off and really get things moving. I'm going to start by handing the floor off to our panelist, Anthony D'Anna, to do a quick intro of himself and deFacto, and then we'll give the floor to Brandon for a couple minutes. So, Anthony, I'm going to pass control to you.
Okay. Can you see that right?
Give us one more second here.
Oh, okay.
All right, great. All right, so you should now have control.
All right, great. Thank you, Jason. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. I'll just give a quick intro on myself and the product. As Jason said, I'm COO of deFacto Global, so I want to tell you a little bit about deFacto Planning, which is our core product, before we get into the discussion today, because I just want to give you guys a little bit of positioning on what the product does and where we're positioned in the market. So deFacto Planning offers business managers a central point of reference for making decisions using past, present, and future perspectives. And this, to me, is very important. It's really a core decision-making capability, but it goes beyond just crunching data. It allows you to look backwards as well as forwards. And so I'll explain that in a second here. Sorry, just trying to, there we go. So deFacto goes beyond traditional BI and ERP reporting, right? So there's tools out there that crunch data, and we do some of that, but we go beyond that. It is a comprehensive planning and modeling product, so it is one single integrated platform that we offer. We do allow for reporting and consolidation, but we don't just report on financial data, we actually do financial reporting. So there's a distinguishing factor there in that, you can use deFacto to do your GAAP and external reporting as well as do your analysis on your financials. But you can go beyond that and bring in operational data as well. Additionally, we allow you to budget and plan and forecast your data in one platform, so it's very easy for you to submit your data for budgets and forecasts, but also be able to compare that to your actual data for all that reporting as part of that. And in addition, we're integrated with the Microsoft Azure machine learning platform, for predictive forecasting and predictive analytics. So again, we're tying the manual forecast in addition to the the computer model generated forecast for predictive analytics. We also allow you to truly model your business and make decisions based on how you structure your data, because how your data is structured inside of your ERP system typically is not how you run your business. So deFacto allows you to really do all sorts of what-if analyses, things like what if I want to do a reorg, or what if I want to make an acquisition or divest a business. So we allow for that very easily. Additionally, for things like advanced business logic, allocations, driver-based forecasting, things like intercompany eliminations as part of consolidation, that's where deFacto shines as well. Okay, we have 100% Microsoft architecture. The key that I just want to show here is we can bring in data from virtually anywhere, but we do have connectors for all of Dynamics and any other ERP system you may want to integrate with. So deFacto is a great consolidation tool if you have Dynamics from one part of your business but not others. And the technology behind it is all Microsoft. We use both the relational database of SQL Server and analysis services. And Excel is our main interface, although we do have web and mobile capabilities also. So we take, the traditional market of BI, performance management, and the predictive forecasting, and we integrate that into one solution, right? So that's where, again, deFacto really brings everything together into that one integrated platform. So you could take those three pieces here, and you could see how we integrate with that within one product. And we're also doing that using the standard Microsoft offerings, right? So things like Power BI natively sits on deFacto. We have the connectors for Dynamics. We can use Azure Machine Learning for predictive forecasting and Cortana Analytics, et cetera. So we're tying all those technologies together into one platform. Okay, so I just wanted to give that basis, and I'll hand it back to Jason here.
Great, thanks, Anthony. I'm going to pass control over to Brandon to do an introduction for himself and Hillstar.
All right. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Anthony, both of you guys for joining today and hosting us today, Jason, and everybody who's joined for this conversation around business intelligence for Dynamics. As Jason said, my name is Brandon George, and I'm actually the president of the Americas region for Hillstar. Just to tell you a little bit about the company, we're actually based out of Venendaal, Netherlands as far as worldwide headquarters. We also have offices in Chicago and in Alabama. We cover across, we've got about 130 customers plus worldwide now across North America and Europe. And one of our major focuses, at least for the Dynamics ecosystem, is around NAV and AX customers, specifically taking that very structured, very highly normalized data and across multiple areas of the business, which I'll show here in a little bit, to being able to really get to the value. And it's all about really focusing on what questions are you trying to answer. And so we bring this out of the box offering, but then from that, that's really a jump start. From the technology perspective of our partnerships, we are a Microsoft Cortana Analytics and Data Analytics partner. We actually have projects that we're working with customers with that predictive side, which Anthony was talking a little bit from his side of things, to where we're helping customers get out in front of like customer profiling, production variances for manufacturing, retail insights, and then further we go down into like offering when it comes to things like mobile or things of that nature. We're also a MicroStrategy partner. That's more of a when it needs to fit well or when you need to complete out a scenario. But that's really more about technology. And one of the things that I always try to focus on when I talk about business intelligence and go speak at these events is that I try to back up a little bit, and also Anthony mentioned this in his slides too, but really business intelligence is more than just tools and technology. It's really a strategy. You really can't buy business intelligence. It's more of an ongoing effort that you have to continually invest in and continually look as far as like what questions you're trying to answer. And so when I talk about this, I always break it down into these three perspectives of data. It's the past, present, and future. And where we see this is our guiding way of how we get started and say, okay, well, how do we look at this? And we always make this a people-first mentality, meaning that it's great about the technology and tools. You have to be really good at it. Microsoft has some really great things that they're bringing to the table for customers, but really what it comes down to are people are wanting to say, what are my business outcomes and what are the questions we're trying to answer? And so we have this value-driven strategy that we follow that starts with the people first, and it's always at the heart of it is collaboration and iteration, meaning that when we look at this, we always actually start off sometimes with saying, forget about technology for a little bit, and what are you trying to answer? What are you really trying to do? And then we go from there with modeling this after we get this jump start from our data warehouse automation tool and say what remains, what remains in these questions that you really can't answer today, or it's hard to answer, it lives outside of Dynamics as far as your solution footprint. And that really leads us then into the data side of things. So when we look at this and we have this map and we understand the questions you're really trying to answer, which is the return on investment statements that you're really driving towards, then we can look and see, okay, what does your data really live, and how do we bring that into this data warehouse concept and being able to then report across either Dynamics as well as whatever other system of record you may have. And this is where we get further and further closer to that technology side of things and understanding things like data governance and quality, and do we need to get external data and extra context to really completely answer the questions or drive towards those business outcomes that you're really after. And then from that, again, I have this slide always as last. I say technology last. It doesn't mean that it's not important, but a lot of times that's too much of the focus at first. And we have to really back into this a little bit sometimes and say, okay, well, what are you really trying to do again? And making that people, process, and data the focus at the very beginning. And then again, you have this whole there's no one size fits all when it comes to tools. I mean, we've got customers that have anything from just Excel to using the full Cortana Microsoft Analytics suite, including Power BI, doing things with R from the predictive analytics side of things, as well as, again, talking about the MicroStrategy mobile focus of being able to have empowered Salesforce that can have on their iPhone, for example, a very interactive experience that can take them from data to decision and decision into action. And so that's our strategy of how we look at this when thinking about, how can you start this? And so when we come into a brand new project for a Dynamics AX or NAV customer, we typically start with this foundation, this data warehouse automation tool that we have that connects to that instance of Dynamics AX or NAV, takes that highly normalized database, and then puts it into that semantic layer and in that business term so that you can have this jump start across multiple areas of a given organization. And then from that, be able to not only have that, but again, going back to where for most customers, at least most, I would say 90% of our customer base right now, Dynamics ERP is just one piece of their total solution footprint. And so time and again, yes, we'll start and jumpstart this in a matter of days with having the data warehouse and cubes generated, and you can have any kind of presentation layer tool, really. What we focus on is the Microsoft Stack and MicroStrategy, but any one out in the market really is a valuable asset to use. And then the other thing is, again, we continually add to this from these other sources of data that exist for these customers. So again, they can complete out the context of what they have for answering the questions that they need. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Jason.
All right, thanks, Brandon. So on to, I'm just going to bring our slides back, my slides back up, and on to the next part of the event today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the survey first, and just to set things up, let everyone know sort of where this discussion is coming from and where it's based. So yeah, the survey that we ran in late 2015, it included a range of participants, both Dynamics customers and Dynamics professionals from across the different products. And we had different questions for each group. So we wanted to know customers' experiences, and we wanted to know the experiences of the professionals who support those Dynamics customers. And what we found was, while there are some customers who companies that really feel like they are meeting their BI and their reporting and their analytics needs, very few are meeting all their needs, and not even that many are meeting what they describe as most needs. So there's still a big range of people out there, businesses out there that clearly see room for improvement to manage data better, to do different kinds of reporting and data management capabilities better. And just to give you a sense here of which products people used, it was fairly well distributed between different products here. All right, so we had 4 main areas. I think we actually broke these down sort of in the description of what today's event would be like. And the first area is broadening access to reports and to tools. So we're very much seeing, like I said before, a mixed response right now in terms of businesses and how they feel they're doing in terms of using the right tools, giving their organization sort of a sense of empowerment in terms of the reports that they run, the reports that they develop, that they need developed in order to do the kind of analysis that's important for their jobs. I just pulled a couple of pieces of data, again, from the survey here that kind of indicate what I'm talking about. And I'd like to sort of throw out the first question related to this. So different tools and the right tools for different roles within the organization, and how important you find that to be when you're talking to a company that's looking to improve its reporting capabilities. And Anthony, I thought I'd start with you on that one. What's your sense of that issue?
Sure. So I think Brandon touched on this too. It's almost like technology last, and I think that's what tends to happen is people get a little bit too excited about tools and not really too excited about getting their data together. So I think what needs to happen is you need to figure out your requirements, build a data model in a structured model in a place where you can access that using different tools depending on the audience, right? So if I'm a financial user, I want to use Excel, or I want to use Power BI, or I even want to use SQL because I'm an analyst at that level, but I'm hitting a consistent data model, that single version of the truth. To me, that's the biggest importance, is have that solid data model, have that data governance around it, and then the tools you want to use, just make it flexible enough so you can plug in different tools to it.
I mean, I think that, Anthony, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, if you look at this, right, I think people are a little bit wary of tools even, or like they have a tool deluge issue going on to where there's just been too much focus on, well, great, we can create a dashboard. Well, is that meaningful? Is it answering the questions you really care about? And going back to the point you just said, Anthony, and that's why we heavily believe in our data warehouse automation approach, is that starting there so that you can have one version of the truth and you can build into that. And then you can overlay for the role because, to your point, like Excel is a huge piece of this, and I know we're going to talk about that. And, Excel is a great presentation layer tool when it's used correctly and not used as a data silo problem. And so that's a wonderful thing for financial analysts, CFOs. But then if you look at it from the perspective of like a mobile sales force, well, again, there's a lot of different tools that exist. And so when it comes down to the process of understanding, what questions are you really trying to answer, who's trying to answer them, what frequency are they trying to answer them at, and even what is their natural workflow? How do they naturally engage with their data or need to engage with their data? Is it mostly a mobile user, or is it an Excel kind of user? Is it more of a truly interactive operational dashboard that's balanced scorecard that can help understand production variances? So this is where it always relates back to that question and process and data first, because ultimately what I've seen, at least when this is rolled out correctly and done so in a very agile way, a very iterative way, then there's a lot of different tools that end up being used at a given company. It's not one size fits all kind of concept. So, and the other thing I'll just add to this, you can see here to where this self-service theme is almost kind of coming to play here. This, do your teams or departments feel empowered to develop or request reports they need? And, majority are still saying no, or even not sure. And I think this actually leads to the point of the fact that there is a self-service myth in the BI realm, in that just because you can use the tool doesn't mean that you have the right data in order to answer the right questions. And so I still see over and over again this myth being played out at each company, to where not everybody is a BI producer. Even with the self-service kind of tools and the Power BI and being able to do ad hoc query creation, you're still not going to have everybody be able to be a BI producer, but they can be a correctly BI consumer.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think you're absolutely right. The tool itself, right? Things like Power BI and Power Pivot and things like that. If 2 people or 10 people or whatever the number is use Power BI to solve the same question, or Power Pivot, would they get the same answer? Right? That's a self-service pulling data in from different places, and that's really the challenge I think that we see a lot of our customers get into.
Agreed, 100% agreed.
Interesting point there. So being a little bit more conservative perhaps in limiting the number of people who are actually building out the reports, making sure that those are high quality and maybe the right people have access to them, but not maybe aren't all trying to build the same report or use the same tools to build the same reports. It tends to be a more successful approach than really sort of letting loose a set of tools on a broad audience of folks in your organization. Is that
definitely. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I mean, if you look at this, like, it's all about trust, right? The two biggest issues that come to BI project being successful, BI analytics project being successful, the two biggest things are trust and adoption. And if you lose trust, the adoption is not going to happen, right? And so then the adoption side of that is more about being able to consume the data that they need to without having to go to 8 different places to be able to answer the question they want to answer. And so you have to start very specific, not try to do everything at once. Roll out across the organization, and as you do so, you actually develop these champions or these BI, true PI power users across different departments that are the typical Excel kind of people that want to take more ownership of this for their department. They understand their department's data very well, and then they become BI producers in the given organization.
I agree. And I wanted to ask about complexity as maybe another factor that I was wondering about, and that actually ties into a question that's already come in. So, Mike, I guess what I was originally wondering is, complexity of data, and if that could be a limiting factor when you're trying to get folks to adopt the right tools, and is that part of the problem when folks haven't done enough planning before, let's say they invest in some software? So that's the first part, and then the second part is, can we relate that back to the experiences of trying to tie Dynamics CRM and Dynamics AX together with a solution as a consolidated solution? So kind of a two-part question there. And with the complexity part, Anthony, maybe I'll throw that to you first. Is that a limiting factor that you see?
Absolutely. I mean, I think part of the challenge and complexity can come in many forms, right? So complexity could be I have 100 data sources or 10 data sources I need to integrate, and I need to marry that data up somehow. So that becomes complex, and again, you need certain skills to do that. Complexities can also be the way your business is run. How do I take that data and model that in a way that is more meaningful to me? Or how do I, we see a lot of customers have these vast allocations processes, right, where they take data at one level and then they're pushing it out to various businesses based on some drivers. That's very complex, right? So what happens is most people take that, they dump it into Excel, they try to make that work, and then they hit a wall, and of course that's going to be a limiting factor. So, but it gets back to that data model and building that complexity or building it, to the end user. You're taking that complexity out of the process for them, right? If you build that into your data model, you manage the complexities there, and now they're just looking at the results of what's been developed. Then they can analyze that data to the end user. The complexity is no longer there. It's when someone tries to kind of do it all on their own, that's where I think people run into trouble.
And Brandon, anything to add there? And perhaps in combination with the question on spanning CRM and AX.
Sure, because I think these are both like tied together, right? And I mean, again, Anthony's spot on what he's saying. So if you look at this, so number one, the complexity side of things. This is why you have the advent of data warehouse automation tools. I mean, that's why this has become, more of a, an art and a science together. I always say that in order to be a really good BI architect, you have to be part MBA, part DBA, and part psychologist. Because you have to know the data, you have to know the business, and you have to tell a good story. So that's not always the case for everybody, right? And so that's why we have things like data warehouse automation tool. That definitely takes a lot out of the complexity from it, and being able to generate a data warehouse, that semantic layer in which you can then have that one version of the truth, right? So that you can report from, which is just a starting point, because the other part of that question is bridging, for example, AX and CRM, or AX and anything really. or nav anything, or GP, whatever system of record you may use. That's another reason why you would want to have this jump start from a data warehouse, and then from that you can extend that, and that's the place that we found to where you bridge those things. You don't really bridge them between the two applications as much anymore, especially when it comes to reporting needs. And we've seen this further, just to spend a little bit more time on this, we've seen this further even when people want to upgrade their software. So they're upgrading from one major version to another. If you start with pointing your old version to this data warehouse, that you start from there and connect that new version to it, well, you're reducing complexity even on your upgrade process. So at least for us, what we've seen, that's the data warehouse automation path, and then that also becomes how that place where you can integrate and have that single point of reporting.
Great point. And sorry to jump slides on you as you were speaking there, but I thought this was just one other relevant chart. So, I mean, we asked folks what kind of skills are internal to their organizations on the customer side. I think at least one of you has mentioned Power BI already, and I think it's no surprise that that has a smaller share of strong skills, which would be the dark blue on the left, or the smallest actually compared to the SQL Server related tools. But I would, if I had to guess, if we go back and ask that in another year, or maybe even less, and we can touch on this later too, I think that blue section will have expanded out somewhat as people get more skills. But yeah, clearly, I mean, with SSIS and SSAS being at least a little more healthy skill sets, to your point on data warehouse and building a data warehouse, that certainly seems like an area that putting people to work would yield a good investment or a good return on investment.
And can we also just real quick, just on this chart, I just like to point out the fact that it really depends on the nature of what you're trying to deliver too, and why these skills will be relevant versus not. Because like Power BI, it's just a visualization tool. Not to take away from what all I can do, but I mean, if you're trying to do something, more operational or more what-if analysis or something a little bit deeper, right now Power BI is just a visualization tool, so it's just one piece. And so it depends on what you're really trying to deliver and achieve. So for what tool you'll end up actually using from the Microsoft stack. So I think that also has relevance to how people are ranking this right now.
I also think there's a continuum in a way, right? Because if you see like SSRS at the top, that has the most skill level because I can write, reporting services reports directly against SQL, directly against my ERP system. The others now are more specialized skills, but once I have integrated my data with SSIS and I built my cubes in SSAS, now Power BI becomes that much more powerful, and SSRS even becomes that much more powerful because now I have consistent data that I can report off of. And I think that's what you're going to your point, Jason, I think that's what you're going to see over time is that the more you're able to generate, either through a data warehouse automation tool, through our modeling capabilities, whatever that might be, creating that centralized data model, the Power BI skills and skills around that are just going to improve around it because the tool is good and is continuing to improve. But you need a consistent data layer in order to make that useful.
Yeah, agreed, Anthony. That's spot on. Yeah.
All right, excellent. Well, let's move on to another pretty related topic, actually, and that's Excel integration. It's a top priority, we believe, because that's what survey participants have told us. And one of the interesting things here is that we've actually been able to replicate that from other studies that have been done or other surveys that have been run in recent times. That have basically shown almost the exact same list of priorities, maybe with one or two things swapped in or out. And so I just pulled the sort of top 7 or 8 items in our top priorities as they were rated by participants here. And as expected, Excel integration with security and auditability was the most voted must-have, with drill down into the transaction level for analytics. Being right up there with it, in terms of its importance. But yeah, so I guess the first question: what does Excel's popularity mean for companies that want to expand access to reports, expand usage of reporting, and use of their data, I guess you'd say, for lack of a better term. And Brandon, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I can start this one. I think it's interesting too. Like, so the BI reporting priority, Excel integration with security and auditability is like a must-have or important. And there's no zero not applicable, right? And so first, I guess I'll start off with, like, obviously Excel is the most widely used BI tool in the world. It's been that way for a long time. People love it because you can do all kinds of things with it as far as like creation of things. The issue that typically takes place is that you're using Excel as that bridge instead of having that data warehouse and that semantic layer to really bring things together across multiple systems. You're using just Excel. And so you'll create these data silo problems that people can't tie out. There's not security. There's not auditability. But here's what's interesting. If you look at that and then the drill down and then the self-service and then right below that is data warehouse automation. So it's like, in order to have that security and auditability, in order to have this drill down, in order to have this typical real self-service that you can offer, you need that data warehouse in order to do that. I mean, that's at least what we found. So, number one, Excel for sure is always going to be around. They're going to continue to invest into it. And if you look at Power Pivot and Power BI, Power Query, things from that Power BI landscape that continue to exist in Excel and Excel services for SharePoint, that's going to continue to exist and be an important front end for a lot of different roles in a given organization.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Jason, on the Excel side. I mean, when we created deFacto, about 7 or so years ago, we made the conscious decision to use Excel as our main interface. And the reason for that is, when we look, we tend to deal with the CFO organization, at least initially within our customers, and then maybe expand beyond that. But if you look at the customers we're working with, the business analyst, the financial analyst, the director of FP&A, whatever they might be, they're living in Excel 10, 12 hours a day. So we made the decision that was going to be our main interface. And if you see some of the vendors that we compete against on the CPM side, especially the SaaS vendors, they came out with web-based applications, and they looked like Excel, but it still wasn't Excel, and you still had to export data down to Excel. And ultimately, that's what happened. So you kind of got this wave of excitement. Oh, this is, cutting edge. It's web-based. It's all that. But ultimately, it still comes back down to Excel. So we have web. We have all the mobile capabilities, but it really comes down to our customers live in Excel. That, to me, is what differentiates us against a lot of our competitors, is that having that great Excel interface and being able to do all the things that are listed here, right? The auditing and security, the drill down, right? All the self-service, all from Excel, to me makes that hugely important for us, particularly, but I think in general for the BI world out there and for the CPM world out there.
That's it. And that's a point I did want to ask both of you about when it comes to security, to actually managing data and not turning an organization into an Excel free-for-all with access to data sources. Is that one of the ways that that your solutions or third-party solutions are better than just Excel on its own? Data management, enforcing policies, things like that.
100%. Yeah, I mean, that takes it from that's where Excel is truly a secure front-end presentation tool versus the place in which data is stored and then becomes disconnected and becomes a problem, right? Mm-hmm. So so for us, a big focus when it comes to any of these projects is not only the usability and questions, but then as a part of that is what is the security that is needed for this? What is performance? Not just security, but also it should perform well and be able to report in a timely manner. So without a doubt, that's always a huge focus of every project, or it should be a huge focus of every project, to make sure that, because there's sensitive data, and I'll let Anthony talk about from the CPM side and all this stuff, but I mean, especially from the financial side of things, you definitely have to lock that down and make sure that it is truly being used as a front-end tool and not as a way to get data outside the company or as a way to become that data silo and then become an issue with your BI strategy.
Right. So, yeah, good point, Brandon, and that's exactly right. I mean, Excel is just, to me, an interface or a window to the data. It's not the data itself. So, we see customers that have these 100-tab spreadsheets, right, with 100 columns in each of them, and you're seeing all these links and lookups and whatnot. And I like to say, well, now deFacto becomes your link, right? right? You don't have Excel as your links anymore. deFacto is the link, and that's where the security is defined. And you're defining security, I think this is important as well. And it gets back to the point we both made earlier that the tool is less important than the data model itself, right? Because you can use different tools. Well, security is important, of course, and securing the data model versus securing the report, right? I see a lot of customers or a lot of competitors out there where they set up security on a particular report. Well, what if I access that data in a different way? Well, do I have security around that? No, so it's important to secure the data model and build the logic and the intelligence into the data model so that regardless of how I'm hitting that data, whether it's Excel or Power BI or another tool, that's secure data and auditable data, right, regardless. And I think that's important as well. And so yeah, I think all these things tie together very nicely, but that's important, is securing that data model.
You mentioned the 100 worksheet, 100 column per worksheet, sort of monster spreadsheet. Is that one of the real warning signs? And are there others that you've seen frequently that really should give an organization a reason to be concerned about their current approach, that either you can share, either anecdotally or just real things that people should be concerned about?
I mean, I could start, Brandon. Just
sure.
Just this past week, I saw two very, very large multi-billion-dollar companies. One is in the restaurant industry, and one is in the financial services industry. And in both cases, they showed us exactly that, right? So these are publicly traded or looking to be publicly traded companies, and they're building these databases in Excel. But the reason for it, the reason why these things kind of happen are different for a lot of cases. So Brandon, you brought it up before. It's like, well, you have this kind of data jockey who knows Excel, and he kind of builds everything out, so he becomes your kind of so-called Excel or BI expert, right? So they're building stuff out, and so he just does what he thinks or she thinks is right and builds out this thing, and it becomes some monstrous Excel model that's out there. In other cases, the complexity. So we talked about complexity of the data. The two that I'm looking at, the two companies I'm talking about, both had very complex business models and a lot of data moving around between them, and their ERP systems just couldn't handle that, and they were both AX customers. And so they wound up building that capability into Excel to make all those things work, but in order to make that work, you needed to have 100 tabs in there, right? So traditionally, you have the file that says, okay, I'm going to basically build a hierarchy of reports, right? Here's New York, here's Boston, here's the East, here's the US, right? That kind of thing, and I'm just adding up values. But what I've seen in these two examples is it wasn't used for consolidation as much as it was that I needed all the granular data in order to work up to really a true consolidated statement because of all the ins and outs of the data. So they had to build that complexity into Excel. And so because there was no other way to do it, and because, as Brandon said, it's easy, right? Excel, you could write a formula and make it work, and that's what happens, right? So that's the challenge I think a lot of customers are having, is they don't know any other way, right? So they wind up building these humongous reports, and before you couldn't open a 100-tab spreadsheet because your computer wouldn't let you, right? But now the technology is improving, and I can have that happen. I can use 64-bit. I can do whatever. So in a way, the technology makes it easier to do these things in Excel. But the customers, or hopefully the companies, also recognize that is not the long-term answer. So in a sense, they're building their model in the hope of finding a solution that they can transfer it to. That's what we're seeing.
That's spot on, actually. And so, it's interesting because we run into very similar stories. And if you look at it from the progression, right? You call it data jockeys, and I try to call them champions, but whatever, semantics, right? But I mean, they start out with honestly trying to answer a question. And, a lot of times they may have started having these reports way before they had Dynamics, AX, or a NAV, or whatever ERP solution you have now. And it's because they're crossing those multiple systems. And it started out for a department. I have an example where it actually started out as a department report about 5 or 6 years ago. It ended up being, there was this Excel file, one customer we had, there was this Excel file that was living on somebody's computer, that someone had shared their computer, and it became a source for 100 different people consuming that, and was bogging down this computer, and it was just totally disconnected, and it was a nightmare kind of scenario. But it started out it started out with the best intentions. You know, and the other thing that we've seen too is not just Excel, but also you'll see Access being used, Microsoft Access being used to cross, you know, multiple systems from SQL Server base to Oracle to Infor to whatever it may exist to something just, you know, the budget inside Excel file. And then from that have Excel on top of that and still have pivot tables that they're running, and it takes 4 hours to generate the files, and then they never tie out. And it's not like it just happened overnight, because this is a progression of, it started out with somebody needing to answer a question. This was the tool at hand. They asked for access from their IT department for the data sources in read-only mode, and they started building these things out. So, I mean, it's a natural progression. I think there's a maturity model, really, in what you see with organizations and how they relate to their systems of record and how they relate to their data. And so, anyway, we see this over and again to where we're helping people. You know, we tell them, show us these problems, show us these questions that you're trying to answer, not just what you're trying to do out of Dynamics, but, you know, what have you built like this? I mean, because I know you've got, every company has them. Every company has these kind of reports that we end up helping replace and get rid of that painful manual kind of thing, so where it's at that data layer, that semantic layer, and then they can really, across the enterprise, correctly answer those questions. And then have Excel still as a front tool if they need to.
Right, Jason, I'll just add to that. The point you made is, do you see red flags? And Brandon, you're absolutely right. If I hear Access, that is a huge red flag. You know, that's probably the #1 red flag. If someone says, "Oh, we developed this in Access," like, oh boy, okay, there's an opportunity here to make that better.
Exactly.
And I think tied into this was the next point I wanted to raise. Actually, before I move ahead, I did just want to address a question that's come up a few times. We are recording today's event, and we'll be making that available. And appreciate everyone asking that. We'll be alerting folks within a couple of days when we have that, along with the slides if you're interested in those too, both the ones that are up now and as well as Anthony's and Brandon's. But yeah, so getting back to the conversation, you know, when it comes to, you know, it's pretty easy to imagine. I'm sure people on this session have even been there. You have a need to do some analysis. You have a need to build a report. What you don't have maybe is the higher level or company-wide policies to dictate how you get access to those data sources, how you work with them, what permissions are built in, and so forth. So that was the next area I wanted to get into, data governance. And what we found, we kind of asked, you know, customers again, what their own data governance plans were. Did they have them even? And not that many really had definitively said that yes, they did have a data governance plan before implementing BI and reporting. A lot just didn't, and quite a few weren't sure too. So when you, I guess the question there, you know, do companies get hung up on this, or you know, if they're thinking BI and or reporting solution investment, is it a good sign that they're at least thinking about the software even if they don't have the plan in place? I don't know. You know, can it work both ways or one way or the other? And Brandon, why don't I put that to you first?
Yeah, sure. So it depends. See, if what we've come across, again, I go back to this maturity model that we kind of look at customers with, you know, what is their system of records? You know, what are they really trying to do? What is their business? What line of business are they in? And then what kind of questions and things they're trying to answer. But ultimately, when it comes to data governance, so I've seen really large companies get hung up on master data management and data governance projects that take a long, long time to really implement. And our approach with this has been is more of the agile side of things, and not to imply that you have to do Scrum and all these things. This is more about being collaborative, iterative, and rolling things out in a way that you're not trying to do everything at once and you're not trying to answer everything at once. You're being specific on a given area of the business, the questions and business outcomes you're targeting, and then how does that data governance play into that? So that backs into, you know, where is the master or where is the system of record for these customers versus products versus sales versus what we're really targeting. And then from that, you can develop that data governance plan, or at least in detail along the way. That's how we do it with our strategy. Now, again, I've seen large companies really get hung up on this, and I've seen smaller companies wanting to do this, but feeling like they're trapped in this like massive MDM data governance. You need a huge committee and be able to decide everything. And by the time you get a plan in place, ultimately, all these questions that you're trying to answer have changed. So at least from what we've seen from a success perspective on this is going back to saying, okay, it is very important. And how you make it important and relevant and make it to where it's agile along the way you're building it as you go, as far as like how you're rolling out the questions you're answering, is exactly that. You go back to those questions and business outcomes that you're targeting. And then from that, the technical aspects of what governs that data, where that data really lives. Is it outside of your environment even? It's some kind of public data that you need to answer these questions. And then what is the governance strategy around that? So that way you're not trying to do everything at once, and you're rolling this out, and that we've seen user adoption increase and success rate increase because it's not too much at once.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with all those things. You know, I think you're spot on, Brandon. I think what happens is people get hung up in, you know, if they decide they want to move forward with data governance, they get hung up in it, and it becomes this you know, ongoing battle to try to figure out what the right answer is, when it could be as simple as, what is your system of record for this data, right? And that's where we start. So if you keep it simple and understand that and then build a plan around it, I think that's what's important. Now, if you look here, it's like 3/4 of the people that were surveyed are saying that we don't have data governance or they're not sure. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And part of that is they probably don't realize, or hopefully this is true, that they don't realize that there is some data governance out there. I mean, if you think about an ERP system like AX, a general ledger, you know, there is data governance around that, right, at some level.
Of course.
So there is something there. They just may take it for granted and not realize it. But when you get into the much larger view of things, right, and the BI, you know, what I consider to be the more strategic BI view of things, and how, you know, where your company, the strategic direction you're going with a BI solution or a CPM solution, you need to have at least answer those questions or understand where you're going with that. But I do think there's probably more data governance in the companies that people may not realize. However, I could see their point as well that, you know, sometimes in some companies it just can be a free-for-all at times, which is a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's a really good point, Anthony. And the other thing about that with, you know, this data governance and the fact that they don't even realize they have it is when a lot of times when users, you know, end users, consumers of business intelligence, unless they're more that power side or more technical side, they hear data governance, a lot of times they just shut off sometimes because it's like not their concern, because that's a more technical thing. Or, you know, and so this is where you have to like embed and weave, you know, get past the semantics and the technical jargon and what does it really mean? And so, yeah, most of these, there are some level of data governance implied by your CRM or ERP platforms, and as you push further into like what this technology can do, but it's more about like who owns the data, right? And who is the steward of that data. So that way when someone comes and has a question about what's being reported on, it's known for who that champion is for that area. So that way it can easily be validated, or the right report can be created, or, you know, what's being generated from an insight can actually be quickly validated. And so I think what's missing from this, from most organizations, is having at the different business level, who we identify typically as a champion for those different departments, they end up being a part of the data governance plan, whether they realize it or not, and whether you call it that or not.
There's a related question here. Does it not get difficult to add controls at a later stage?
Well, I mean, from what we've seen, no, as long as you're moving in this very, you know, agile fashion. Now, it depends on, I guess, the definition of control. Like if you want to take something away that you've already given, people may complain about it, but not from what at least we've experienced and seen with, because most of this is policy, and then how you implement policy and how that policy relates to the definition of what you call cost of goods sold or gross net sales or whatever metric that you end up using from your insights to be able to say, where does that really come from out of our transactional data? Who's actually owns that really? So that way it's more policy and people that makes this work versus so much as technology. The tools are typically pretty easy.
Right. And I think as if you think about a successful data warehouse or a successful CPM implementation, why is it successful? Because you're continuing to grow it, right? You're bringing more information in. And so the key to me is if you set the policy early and you've identified, again, you don't get too hung up on it. As more data comes in, as you identify more data, as long as you make that part of your process is to dictate that policy throughout. Like right now, I'm bringing a new field into my sales model, and I want to, where is the system of record for that, or who owns that, right? All the things that Brandon's been saying is we identify that and just make that part of our process as we continue to add data to our data warehouse or to our data model.
And to that notion of adding controls later, the idea of removing access to data, that seems to me at least to be something that wouldn't occur all that often. Adding controls to that access seems more reasonable. I mean, in many cases, why would someone be accessing data if it wasn't helpful to the kinds of reports they needed to work from or the kinds of analysis they needed to do, right? Maybe it's the way they access that data.
Sure. Which is perceived as being taken away, Rod.
Right. And I think what happens is if they're used to getting it one way, right, and they had access directly into the system, and then now all of a sudden you put these policies in place and you're getting that same data, but it's coming through a model or a warehouse or something that you now are controlling access to, yes, you're taking that away, right? So that's a perfect example is as the systems change or as you consolidate the data and have that consistent data model, you may have to turn some of that down, which is not going to make people happy, but unfortunately, that's what has to be done as part of that policy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we've seen. Like, you'll go from an organization with being able to have access to their ERP database and being able to do ad hoc queries, which can get out of control and have impact on your production instance of whatever you're running. And so you move that, and you can actually answer more questions, but it's the perception of loss of control by that user to be able to query anything at any given time. Whereas, I mean, to Anthony's point, to where being able to saying we can actually answer more questions for you, but you just can't directly go against your transactional system anymore, and that benefits everyone from that single source of the truth and that one version of the truth concept.
Right.
All right. As we do near the top of the hour, I did want to get to at least a couple more questions here, and this one was a theme that we are always interested in asking, not just about BI and reporting topics, but almost any capability that you, as a customer of Dynamics ERP or Dynamics CRM, working with a Microsoft partner in large part to deploy, to support, to service those kinds of solutions. How helpful is your partner when it comes to these things? And with something specialized like BI and reporting, it's certainly an area that we want to know, how well has your partner advised you? How successful, and from a partner perspective, how successful are your clients in actually deploying these kinds of solutions? So I just want to run through a couple of questions that we asked. First was this one: how well has your partner advised you as a Dynamics ERP or CRM customer on reporting? And I mean, you can see how mixed this was. So a quarter say good advice, 38% say no guidance at all. There is a segment that said poor advice, and then a lot who just weren't sure. And I pulled a few of the comments that we took from participants. The first three that you see here actually were people who rated throughout the survey we gave them. They were people who actually said they had successful BI and reporting solutions in place. Either an ISV solution, which is on their own, as you see in the first comment there, or just went out on their own and figured it out. the fourth one there that I kind of highlighted in pink or light kind of red color there, that was interestingly a customer that didn't get great advice, and then ended up being very unhappy with their the solution that they ended up with, or the state that they're in now, I should say. Obviously, just one anecdotal example there, but I thought that was an interesting case compared to the others. On the other side of the coin, you might say, is the partner perspective, and there's more partners insight, partner responses in the full report. So we're just touching on it here, but of your clients who have invested in BI and reporting, how many were successful? And again, really mixed results. You know, different partners, and there's a lot of variables here. Not all partners get involved in implementing BI and reporting. Some only do it for a small percentage. Some do it all the time. Some sort of wholesale off or outsource or look to another partner with more expertise to really handle those kinds of challenges for their clients. So it really is a mixed bag, as you can see. And these are some partner comments from the survey again. Frustration, perhaps, with some of their clients and not being willing to invest. The extra effort of BI or reporting solutions on top of ERP made it a hindrance for the primary, let's say, Dynamics partner to take it on. So really a lot of complicating factors there, and I'd love to discuss that a little bit more with in the time we have left here. So, you both, Brandon and Anthony, both work with partners and customers on a daily basis. Some customers seem to do better by not involving their partners, as we've seen kind of anecdotally there. A segment of partners are involved and willing. How does that reflect your findings in working with companies on a daily basis? And Brandon, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, this is a really good point, and it's not surprising. The ERP partners are focused on ERP, and that is their primary focus. And one of the beliefs I have personally, and while we exist, is that you have to have business intelligence and analytics as your primary focus, because it is a different skill set. It is a different way of thinking about how to approach projects, and when that is the issue, and that's why actually one of the things that you talked about was outsourcing. I mean, we have a number of partners that we're actually their BI implementation and services arm for. And the reason why that they went with this route was because that they realized that we have the staff that focuses just on this across North America and Europe. And they just can't keep people around as far as the reporting side of things. And you even see this right here, like they create the operational reports, which is typical, right? So it's operational intelligence, operational reports. That goes hand in hand with, the ERP rollout. And what we found is that when you come to a true business intelligence and analytics kind of platform, I mean, again, it's a total different mindset, total different skill set, and how you engage and how often you engage and what you dedicate towards it. And so from that perspective, at least from the partner side, that's my take on that. And from the direct customers, because we do have our direct customers, we love direct customers, obviously, but from the direct customer side, we still follow the same approach, no matter if it's a customer of a partner of ours that we're doing the work for, or if it's a direct customer of ours. When we go about this with this value-driven approach and starting with that foundational data warehouse in a week's time, and then from there, expanding out, not trying to do everything at once, following this approach that we've laid out, we've seen success after success because it's very specific deliverables. It's going live with specific questions. It's not trying to do everything at once. It builds a momentum in the given organization to where they want more and they can answer more for themselves and they believe in what they're seeing. Whereas if you look at it from like an ERP project, right? ERP projects, they're long tail. They take a lot of planning, a lot of effort. Everybody hates you because you're changing everything about their life. And the BI projects are typically done in days and weeks and spread out over time depending on how the company is taking place. So that's just two different mindsets really when it comes to the ERP versus the BI side of the world.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, I think the perspective of both the customer and the partner on these slides could vary drastically. You know, I look at, you know, most, and this is not for every Dynamics partner, but most Dynamics partners are specifically around a technology, right, around AX, around GP, whatever that might be. And of course, they maybe do multiple of these, but that's the general idea. They built their business implementing ERP. So if you think about BI in general, it should go beyond your ERP data, right? There's a lot more information out there you need to make decisions. And I think what happens is that partners tend to be kind of siloed about the type of data they're looking for. Additionally, when I look at BI, even around, you know, what is considered BI? If I use an analysis cube in AX or GP, is that considered BI because it's a cube? Right? I don't know, and I don't know, and I can't answer for what these people are saying, but to me, that could be a successful BI implementation or a poor BI implementation, depending on what the customer's reaction to that is. So, you know, it's hard to kind of translate a lot of this without getting a little deeper into it. But from what I've seen, you know, there are specific skill sets necessary, and you need to go beyond just your ERP data when it comes to me, more strategic BI. And the same thing around things like CPM, and we only see very few partners who have the ability that really understand the business processes around CPM, around financial reporting, around things like budgeting and planning. I mean, those are specific skills that you need to live before you could actually implement. And, you know, the fact that I can create a cube does not make me a CPM person, you know. So again, you need to take that into consideration as well, I think, as you look for partners here. So it's really a matter of perspective on both sides. And you can see, I mean, it's funny, as they say, it takes two to tango. Well, you kind of see, as Jason said, both sides of the coin here. You see the perspective of the partner and this perspective of the customer, and there's obviously some disconnects there. And I think the challenge is, you know, because it is specifically around Dynamics, that causes a lot of the disconnects because the expectations may not be aligned.
Yeah, I just real quick too, I just want to add to that, Anthony, because I mean, you're spot on again but I mean, if you look at this too, like you've got built-in business intelligence capabilities, right, which is confusing at times because it's called BI, because it's using a certain technology to deliver a report. But when it comes back to this conversation, you know, you can't buy business intelligence. It's a strategy. It's something that you're ongoing and always doing, right? And so that's also a part of this issue, I think, is that it's confusing when, like, new ERP products are sold, and it's like, oh, yeah, it's built in. It's a part of it. But, I mean, to your point, like, you have to go beyond the concept of just that one ERP implementation, because for almost every customer, they have data in other systems of record that have nothing to do with Microsoft, that may live 100% in the cloud, or it may be coming from some cloud data source that is a public data set to complete that context, right? And you can't bring that, or you shouldn't be bringing that, into your Dynamics AX or NAV or GP implementation. That has to be brought along with that data at a place that, you know, we keep talking about data warehouses and that semantic layer to be able to bridge that and create that. And so that's where this skill set and this mentality and this, you know, it comes down to semantics even of like what people are calling BI.
Well, what makes me cringe is when I hear management reporter is a CPM solution. That makes me cringe every time I hear it. So to your point, exactly right, you know.
And we could I think have a whole other discussion here just about you know, BI and reporting and CPM skills and how customers can evaluate whether their you know, main Dynamics partner can meet those, can serve those, what qualities to look for. I mean, that's a great topic and a big one. We are at the top of the hour. I wanted to just quickly check, Brandon and Anthony, are you able to stay on the line for a few more minutes here as we take a couple questions and sort of finish up? Okay, great.
Yep, I'm happy to stay on too.
Okay, wonderful. I do want to just remind folks, if you have a question either about, you know, some of these concepts, some of the survey data, or questions for either Brandon or Anthony individually or together, please answer those now. We're happy to take those. I guess the last, and actually we did have one of those that came in. Maybe just we'll get to that, and then we'll start looking at sort of wrapping up and final questions here. Warehouse automation tools. One of the callers does want to know, and while we answer this question, I'm just going to put up the contact information for our panelists here. Proprietary or standard warehouse automation tools that either of you uses in your solutions. Brandon, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, so when you look at data warehouse automation tools, there's a lot of different things that exist out there, depending on what solution you have as far as the ERP and what you're trying to do. One of the things that we set out when we have ours that we take advantage of for our projects is, number one, it's built off Microsoft technology completely. Number two, it's 100% open. And I want to say that again, it's 100% open, meaning that every aspect from how dimensions are built and the staging aspect and the facts are created to what data you're pulling in to what scripts you even want to run, it's 100% open. And so that means because it's built off Microsoft technology, it requires SQL Server as that starting point for this. That means that you can go in and tweak and be able to look at everything that is taking place if you need to or want to extend it way beyond what comes out of the box, which is the point of it. It's meant to be a jump start. It's not meant to be an end-all, be-all. It's meant to save, 100 days of work that you'd have to pay for to generate this manually and then have to keep that up to date, right? So that's one of the biggest things that I've found, at least from the data warehouse automation side of things, that you need to look at. Is it open? Is it something that you can look into and that if you have the skills or we train you for it from a SQL side, that you can go in and edit, modify, understand what's going on, see the pieces that are running, and see the end result of how that ties back from whatever fact or dimension that you're generating that ends up in a cube so that you can do sales analysis or financial planning or whatever it may be. You can track it all the way back to the source data that's coming out of. These data warehouse automation tools, too, to keep in mind, they're typically targeted to these specific, and like what we do, we focus on Dynamics ERP. So we take all this normalized data, bring it into this semantic denormalized layer, and then from there you can go about it. Now, from what they don't do, right, what a data warehouse automation tool will not do typically is that if you have some kind of custom manufacturing execution system, which we run into all the time, that's maybe you built 10 years ago, maybe it's based on SQL, Oracle, whatever it may be, these data warehouse automation tools are not going to know that schema, right? So it can still be used to connect into that data warehouse, but that's where the extra modeling and the completeness and the extra context comes into play.
Anthony, did you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, for us, it's different but the same. I mean, the technology at the back end, I think we use is very similar. I think, based on what I was talking about earlier, kind of in the opening statements when we kind of differentiate between BI and CPM and the data warehouse versus, what we consider to be a model and deFacto, the approach we take is again, similar but different. So we have pre-built capabilities, again, or we call connectors to bring data in from various ERP systems, including all the Dynamics flavors, of course. And then we have what we call our business modeler, which is our administrative interface, which allows business users to really drag and drop and organize their dimensions exactly the way they want. And then the analysis services cube is automatically built around all that data. So we kind of take it from end to end, where the end user, the business user, who's an administrator, can control exactly what the cube looks like without having to have any technical skills at all to do that. Yeah. And then, of course, on top of that, you get the budgeting and planning, which, now because of the way we've developed those models, it allows you to write data back. It allows you to build workflows around those for approval processes. All that kind of comes out of the box with the product as well. So we're taking a different tack, like I said, where I think we're solving potentially similar but different challenges. But so there's a lot of overlap, I think, what Brandon and I are talking about, but ultimately the technology is very similar, and then ultimately it's Microsoft technology.
Yeah.
We have a question here on AX. So someone using AX 2012 has a requirement to consolidate data for 12 legal entities ledger-wise, vendor transaction-wise, customer-wise. How can we achieve this? And Anthony, I'll start with you this time. You want to offer any guidance on that?
Sure. I mean, so one of the benefits of deFacto, as you may have seen, is consolidation. So whether all your data is in AX or maybe in multinational companies, they'll have the U.S. will be in AX, but in Asia it'll be Sun, and in Europe it'll be Oracle, whatever that might be. So deFacto is really good about consolidating that data. So taking the data in from AX, again, you can organize that data however you want. So if you think about a company dimension, you would have 12 companies, and if you had intercompany transactions between them, of course, we could work and eliminate those as needed on both the actual side as well as on the budgeting side. So we could do that from a financial perspective. And then if you had sales data and the other pieces of data you mentioned, again, that would come in typically to a single model depending on your dimensionality, meaning if I want my financial consolidation, I'm probably not going to have product or customer level information in there. That probably doesn't make sense. But if I wanted a sales model where I wanted to do either budget at that level, or I wanted to analyze data at that level, then I would introduce a couple more dimensions to that model and have a separate model for that. And then that's something we would just work with you to figure out the best approach to.
Yeah, so I mean, to Anthony's point a little bit earlier, I mean, I think that we have very complementary things that we're solving for people, and then they're very similar. So we have our data warehouse automation is very similar in this, in that you have control over these legal entities, whether they have shared financial dimensions or not, whether certain ones have shared financial dimensions or not, depending on what your setup is inside Dynamics AX. That all comes over natively, and then you have the opportunity to configure that in our semantic models that we have. And then from that, it's not just from financials too, but it's also from that sales side or that purchasing side when it comes to inventory insights as well, actually. So there's obviously, depending on if the products are global or if they're shared among specific organizations within or specific legal entities that are out of the 12. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think we're both saying the same thing. It's what we can bring is we're bringing this ability to be able to connect to your instance of AX with those 12 companies, and you may have, like Anthony said, 3 others in Europe and 2 others in Asia that are on other systems that can be brought into this single source, this single place, and that you can do consolidation off of, and that you can have even mappings. Maybe the financial dimensions are different in these other systems, but you can actually map to those within the data warehouse automation and be able to then have that consolidated view because of that map exists, because a user set that up.
All right. Well, I think we are going to start wrapping up. We appear to be at the end of the question queue here. There was one follow-up, just whether Power BI can be used to achieve this. I think it's fair to say taking the strategies you talked about there, the concepts that both of you raised, Power BI certainly could be a component of an end solution that tackles this challenge. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, it's just a visualization tool, though, at the end of the day, right? I mean, Power BI, when you look at it, I mean, yeah, you have Power Query and you have, the Power Pivot stuff that you can do with it. But at the end of the day, what Power BI is doing is visualizing a data story. So if what you're trying to create is a dashboard concept or a mobile dashboard even now, or you're doing some streaming analytics from Cortana and you're wanting to see that update kind of live on a workspace, inside Dynamics, that's great and that's what it's designed for. But when it comes to like what you're trying to answer and how and who and what frequency, that's what really should say what you should use. So can Power BI do everything, or should it be used to do everything that you're trying to achieve? The answer is no. But is it a part of the solution and should be considered as part of like what you have on that presentation layer? Without a doubt.
Yeah. All right. Anthony, anything to add there?
No, I think you said it actually, Jason, right up front. You said, is it a component of the solution? I think, yes, it's a component, but it certainly is, as Brandon's saying, it's not the solution to solve everything.
All right. Hey, I want to remind everyone in the audience, we're going to start wrapping up. When you leave today, you will see a quick survey that pops up. Along with it, you should also see a link to the report itself if you haven't taken a look. Please do fill out that survey. It'll just take a few seconds, and we really do appreciate the feedback. Our speakers always appreciate it, too, to know what you thought of today's event. It's a little different from what we typically do, but we hope to do more of this kind of panel session as we run more surveys and do more investigations in different areas of the dynamic software and related solutions. So really glad to be able to do this today. And Anthony and Brandon, thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, Jason. This is great.
And their contact information is up. I'm sure both of them would be happy to take any additional questions you have. Please look for the recording that will be coming out hopefully in the next couple of days. We'll send an email when that's available. And yeah, with that, we are going to start wrapping up. This session was a lot of fun. We ran a little bit late, but we are going to conclude now. So with that, I'm going to just say thanks and have a great day, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.